Welcome back. Thank you for staying with Kenya's fastest growing television. And as earlier publicized and promised, we are making sense of the numbers in as far as the budget 2025-2026 is concerned. And who best to break down those numbers and explain to us what John Mbadi presented today to Parliament than our panel tonight. CPA Benedict Omolo is a member of the ISPAC. Davis Tayo is the Managing Partner, Africa Social Financing Center. Nicholas Cairo is the Associate Director, Tax and Legal Services. Raphael Maruri is a Certified Public Accountant. Gentlemen, thank you very much for making time for us. On a night we are exclusively talking about money and where it's coming from. Let me quickly get what your initial thoughts are in as far as the proposed 2025-2026 budget is concerned. We can start with you, Nicholas.
Thanks, Bakar. If you look at the finance bill, especially that was shared earlier on, from a revenue perspective, we have seen the government has changed tact. Right now, we are not seeing any introduction of new taxes or hike in tax rates. However, on the flip side, what the government has done just to ensure this revenue mobilization, they have gone ahead and rationalized the tax expenditure. In this case, reducing or limiting the tax incentives available to the public or to the taxpayers.
Davis.
Thank you for having me. Listening to Mbadi, I actually couldn't help but remember the manifesto of UDA. And I'm seeing a government that is so keen to implement what it promised. The whole budget speech was inundated with reference to better. And I think it's a good thing for the country because we're seeing politicians really struggling to translate their promises into government policy and government action papers.
And better, that is in reference to the bottom-up economic transformation that the president used as a tool to campaign.
Certainly.
Let me get your thoughts equally, Benedict Omolo.
Thank you very much. I think the beginning point for me would be to ask the extent to which we are keen to manage our deficit. Of course, it has gone down by about 11 or so billion, but even then, could the Budget and Appropriations Committee have been bolder in their recommendations, where then they would address the deficit and also looked at some of the expenditure items to reprioritize them? What I also felt was a gap, or I did not hear it come out very clearly. There has been the remittances by the diaspora is now about 4% of our GDP. It has the greatest revenue of Forex compared to our traditional foreign exchange earners. So the question is, what did he do to incentivize our diaspora, whether it is investment schemes or whatever else he would have been able to do for them? I hope at least they get registered for voting. And finally, is that I did not hear very clearly the fifth pillar or the fourth pillar on the bottom-up economic transformation agenda on the digital superhighway. I think they avoided that. Our youth are pretty engaged on the digital space, but I didn't hear him come out very clearly on the digital superhighway and what the government is going to do for the young people on that score.
Raphael, equally, let me get your thoughts in as far as the assessment of the 2025-2026 budget is concerned.
When I listened to the CS, one of the things that came to my mind is the obvious supplementary budgets that keep on coming on. So the question that came to my mind was, is this budget going to be followed, or we are going to have several supplementary budgets that makes what he gave us today null and void? So we need to know, and I thought measures should be put in place so that we don't get a supplementary budget after supplementary budget, because whatever is presented today then becomes just something else. So my thought process is that we should get measures. I think the registrar should put up laws that put up on the supplementary budget. The other thing that comes to mind is the whole statement by the CS was on broadening the tax base. This is something we've heard day in, day out, but I didn't hear him talking about how he's going to strengthen the tax base. I think our tax administration has relatively been lazy, just focusing on the payee and the employed people. knowing that we operate a very juakari economy in this country of ours?
Fair enough. We are getting the thoughts of our panel in as far as the budget presented to the National Assembly by Treasury CS John Mbadi is concerned. The magic number tonight is 4.29. This is the largest, in as far as size is concerned, of Kenya's budget. I believe 300 billion more than what was presented last year. How difficult or easy is it to run a lean and mean government? Is 4.2 trillion shillings really necessary? Cairo?
Yep. If you look at the government, and it's one thing I think the minister has mentioned that he began using a zero-based budget approach. But did he really look at the numbers critically? That's one thing we need to consider, because if you're looking from a zero-based budget approach, you anticipate they have queried all the expenditure that has been booked in, and they have factored in critically, such that for any expenditure that we are incurring, it's something that has been agreed. Are they comfortable with the 4.2? That's another discussion. And then the other flip side is, are we able to raise the amount? That will be a whole topic on its own to discuss.
You have mentioned the financial jargon of a zero-based budget. I'm sure there is politically broad-based government office. What that, in a nutshell, in my understanding, for purposes of context of our audience, means is everyone who wanted money needed to justify. Is it as simplistic as that?
True. Yeah. So previously, it was much more of an incremental budget. So, for example, if I was allocated 100, the next time I come to the budget committee, I need 110. They'll just query the incremental. But right now, they are saying it's a zero-based budget, meaning that they have went ahead and justified each number that's been booked in the expenditure.
Benedict, still on the same question of 4.29, was that figure necessary? Some question that it could have equally been lower.
I tend to agree that it should have been lower. With a zero-based budget, I think the way we budget as a government, where we have our expenditure which we justify and then try to find a way in which you will fund it, does not make a lot of sense, especially when we are in a difficult situation as the country is currently. If we take the ordinary revenues at 2.7 billion, and interest alone for our debt is 1 trillion, so already you're only left with 1.7 trillion. I mean, that already should tell us we are in a problem. And so our expenditure side should have been brought down. Perhaps, and not to disparage the CS, there could be this thing that every year we've got to increase the budget. I did the biggest budget. I don't think that should be a motivator. The critical issue, especially that this was the baseline for zero-based budgeting, we should have seen a reduction. I would have been more comfortable to see us coming towards where our revenue target of 3.3 is, thereabout. It doesn't make sense that we have gone beyond, because then our deficit will continue being a problem unless we find a way out of this situation.
Davis, again, Benedict talks of a zero-based budgeting formula. What Cairo pointed to, which has been the case, is a progressive incremental budget. What would have the latter, which is zero-based, posed as an advantage if it was to be used as a formula?
The issue is justification. And as a leader in government, you really don't have to do much. You just need to look outside your window, and you will see the Gen Zs agitating and demanding for many things. You will see regions demanding comparative development issues and those kind of things. So I don't think the government really had an option. There is this barrage of demands from Kenyans, people asking for free education, free health facilities, good roads. And what do you do as a leader? You put up the budget, you come and display the budget to the people, which brings us to what my brother was saying. Is it realistic? Is it achievable? Are we going to see supplementary budgets, after a day or two? So I think the demand's high, and I think it's a principle in economics that resources are limited. People want much more, But as a government, you have to meet these demands because you promised.
Davis, you talk of the demands being higher.
Yes.
Can the demands be tamed, managed?
They can be managed. And it brings us to the aspect of efficiency, frugality, and corruption. Because if we are able to just tame corruption, and I don't want to quote our leaders, but Mbadi even was quoted the other day saying, can you just reduce it by half? So if we are to take care of corruption alone, we will unlock a lot of resources. My brother here was pointing out to the debt burden. Sometimes I even shudder to imagine the kind of surplus we will have if we didn't have the debt. Just imagine the 1.3 we are paying out being available to us. That's a lot of money. It's 3 times what we are giving the counties. So it's something which we must aspire as Kenyans, that we must bring efficiency in how government works. We must tame, if not eradicate, corruption, and we will be able to create internally generated resources, even without taxing people more.
Fair enough. And for the record, President is on the record saying Kenya loses 1/3 of its budget to corruption. Treasury CS was quoted to have said equally, urging investors who get government money through dubious ways not to invest in countries like Kenya, but invest in Tanzania. He definitely faced a backlash for that. Raphael, 4.29 trillion shillings. To the viewer who is watching, whose pockets need to be the producer of that amount, are they getting value for that?
To the viewer, the basic things that concern every other person, commonly known as Wanjiku, will be the basic education, health, and such. But when we look at the allocations that are done to these sectors, case in point, health, there's already we are signatories to a treaty that we should allocate 15% of our budget to health. Is that being followed? So even as we speak about zero budgeting and all this, are we also true to what we've signed? Are they just pieces of paper that we sign? So to the common mwananchi, these numbers will not make sense until he gets the basic. And the basic are basically education and health. When you look at what is happening in our hospitals today, in the streets there has been that fear that the CS tried to root today in terms of whether examinations will be sat for or not, where he tried to erase our fears by saying that they allocated, I think, 700 and something million to education to ensure that examinations are sat for. So to the common man, to answer to your question, these numbers will not make any sense when he goes to the hospital and does not get the drugs. When he goes to school and he's told that the mwalimu tells them that the allocation, the capitation has not reached schools.
Raphael, you say these numbers to the common man, to the common mwananchi, do not make sense. The government and policymakers often point to citizens who want literally and quite frankly everything free. Free education, free healthcare.
Yes.
Where will that money come from? From not to be a defensive in nature of what the government and policymakers are saying, but are they justified to pose it as that way?
I think what we need to do, as my brother alludes to, is also to look at the prudent management of the scarce resources that are there. If you look at the education sector today, there's a bursary by the MCA, bursary by the Women Rep, bursary by the governor. Basically, all the political leaders have a bursary. If all these funds are put together and allocated to schools, maybe it could minimize such fears that we have in education. If you look at what has happened in the past, the route at KEMSA, he's just said that if we can tame, if not eradicate corruption, these things will be possible. If you look at our budgeting, I like it when the CS says it's zero budget, but I also feel like when he budgets with a 4.5% deficit, he's too ambitious. It's just a too ambitious budget. I think by the virtue it was a zero-based budget, he should have narrowed down to what we have. All of us here have bigger needs than what we have, but we live within our means. As a country, I think what we need to do is to start living within our means. So focusing on a 4.5 deficit in our budget, it's also a problem. The other thing that I want to point out is it has been said that we have budgeted corruption. I think that's what my brother here was alluding to. Once we move from that and now start living within our means, this budget will reach the common person and the numbers will make sense.
Nicholas, let's break it further. If this was a household whose lead earner had 4.2 shillings and is supposed to pay debt and has budgeted for from that 4.2 shillings that he or she has, would that be good or bad economics in your view?
It will be bad economics, especially if you're looking at debt of, we're expecting finance costs worth 1.2 trillion, which is like a third of the amount that's due. We'll expect ordinarily everyone will then have to squeeze for the other expenses or try to tame the other expenses. And that's where I think we should also look at rationalizing. Remember, bulk of the money is going to the domestic debt. Yeah? Does it mean then the rates, the interest rates at Kenya are high? I know the minister mentioned that the interest rates are reducing, which is actually a fact, they are reducing. However, can it go lower? Can the government then also try and tap other sources that are cheaper and also stop maybe competing with the private sector in the credit market space?
Okay, this discussion continues here on Kenya's fastest growing television. We are getting quick comments from the panel tonight in as far as the 2025-2026 budget is concerned. We still have more stories to go.